I'm doing fine. So leave me alone, so leave me alone, so leave me alone. I'm doing fine. So leave me alone, so leave me alone, so leave me alone. I'm doing fine. So leave me alone, so leave me alone, so leave me alone. I'm doing fine. So leave me alone, so leave me alone, so leave me alone, leave me alone.
Now broadcasting from two anarchist jurisdictions. It is anarchist jurisdiction. Terry, let's go over with the life update that I have. I lived in Seattle for the past 4 years, and I do want to thank everybody that made my time there pretty great. But I have moved on now to Portland, Oregon, where I'm broadcasting from somewhat of a bunker, but a bunker with a fridge, soon to be a sauna. I'm in my brother's house, and my brother has always done quite well for himself. So, this is a nice place to be able to stay while I embark on my next journey. So we are still anarchist jurisdiction. There is no reason for us to stop the show. If anything, now we have an expanded perspective on living in not one, Terry, but two very chaotic and dangerous cities.
I was about to say, you are in a safe place since you're in the bunker. You are in
the bunker,
the most dangerous city in America, aren't you? The anarchist jurisdiction known as Portland.
Yes.
You are edgy to say the least.
Boy, I ventured out today for a while, Terry, because the sun was shining, with my wits about me and common sense, and heavily armed, of course. And I will say this, Terry. We do joke about what's going on in these two cities. Downtown Portland is pretty sad. It's pretty beat up.
Respect. Sad.
It's beat up. I mean, there's a lot. There's a lot of boarded up windows. There's going to be a lot of recovery that's going to need to take place before it's going to be anything like people remember it from 10 years ago or even 2 years ago or a year ago. I will still contend that the national coverage of what's happening in these jurisdictions that we do live in, let's not forget that there isn't some reality to it as well. That being said, I did wander around the danger zone and felt anything but.
Yeah.
And I will say this. We'll go back to your jurisdiction there, Terry. Maybe more cities want to have anarchy as their form of government because the one that has a 5-0 football team. I'm
saying, right? Maybe is that the key? Is that the key?
That's the key. Go lawless.
A little bit of anarchy.
Yep.
A little bit of lawlessness.
A lot of lawlessness, and then 5-0. 5-0.
But you know what's crazy though? I mean, it is funny to say that, but I think the Seattle Seahawks organization could not be further from anarchy and anarchists. I mean, of any franchise in the National Football League. I mean, you have nobody that's in trouble with the law. You have, Russell Wilson leading the helm, who is the most pure, wholesome soul in the professional sports, I think. I mean, the guy doesn't even cuss. What does he say? Like, golly gosh darn? Man, we almost had that.
That sounds like something you would say. And I've poked fun at Russell in the past because he is just sort of. Normally, you think of football players because and you can speak to this more than I can, Terry. They need to have like this brutal edge to them, and Russell Wilson is nothing but like kindness and happiness, and it's a weird juxtaposition compared to what he does on the field when he has to deal with people who are completely brutal.
Yeah, he has completely turned the stereotype of a football player on its ear. I think, when you talk about quarterbacks, though, a lot of times they don't necessarily always fit the stereotype of the meathead, Biff football player, like I'm stupid,
right,
starting defense, Gronk, right?
Gronk.
But I think Russell Wilson just has taken it completely to the other side of all of that, where he's absolutely furthest from that side of the spectrum as you can possibly get. Nice guy. He is a stepdad, a doting father. He doesn't use foul language, and he's really kind of geeky, and he's really nerdy. And he got, it's funny, he got a lot of flack for a long time about being as nerdy and geeky as he is. But personally, I love it. I love the geekiness in Russell Wilson. I'm kind of, the way he tries to be cool sometimes kind of, it tickles me a little bit. And it's like, that's not you, man. That's not you, but it's cool that you try.
It is. Yeah, it is. I mean, the Mr. Unbelievable types is that what it was? Like and when he wasn't the focal point of the team, when the Legion of Boom, arguably top 5 defenses of all time. If they had won that second Super Bowl, it would be hard to dismiss them as one of the greatest defense of all time, right up there with the Steel Curtain and the Chicago Bears. Right. I don't think that he got as much respect from his teammates, and I know you can neither confirm or deny this, but I can tell you firsthand that he didn't. But now that I made some jokes, and some ex-teammates definitely laughed.
Yeah, I think they probably gave him a hard time, especially off the field, and I think a lot of times with a lot of quarterbacks. At least the quarterbacks that I've dealt with in my history of playing football, they were never usually the hangout guys. They were never usually necessarily the quote unquote cool guys in the locker room. And I think, again, Russ was definitely not that guy in that locker room. You think of the characters that were in that Super Bowl locker room when the Seahawks won in 2013 and those teams that were there, 13, 14, 15. You're talking about some serious, like Marshawn Lynch.
It's hard to imagine Marshawn Lynch and Russell Wilson having anything to talk about.
Oh, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
But I think you look at those guys, the complete polar opposites: Marshawn Lynch and Russell Wilson, Richard Sherman and Russell Wilson,
right?
Michael Bennett and Russell Wilson. Some of the other guys that were on the team were just like polar opposites from Russell Wilson. So I think the way that they were brought up and some of the things they like to do maybe for fun were completely different. And I think they probably teased him a little bit about that. Maybe when he wasn't around, they made a joke. But I think at the end of the day, you had to respect what he did on the field. And that's all that really matters. They respected what he did on the field. I think they respected him as a leader. And that's why he led them to the championship that they got, the Super Bowl that they got.
I think that the contentions – it became a little bit contentious in that locker room, which you don't really need your players to get along, as evidenced by the Seahawks winning and the Pittsburgh Steelers that won 4 straight championships. They hated each other, but it doesn't really matter. But some of the things were like Russell got special treatment when really who was carrying the team was the Shermans and the Bennetts and everything. This year, however, it's abundantly clear who is carrying this team.
Right.
It is Russell Wilson, who is by far the front runner for the NFL MVP.
Oh yeah, easily. You look at what he's doing this year. I mean, to be honest with you, I know we sometimes, at least I do, and I don't know if it's a sign of getting old, is that I think of Russell Wilson as the young quarterback, right, of the Seattle Seahawks. This is a guy that's been here 8-9 years, right?
He's 31.
He's been here a long time, and I think back to the young Russell Wilson, and I think maybe there was I don't want to say animosity, but I think especially you talk about the defensive guys that were really responsible for a lot of success of this team in those early years.
Right.
Maybe there was some give us our props over here. We are doing our thing. We get it. Russell Wilson's pretty good, but we're doing our thing. That being said, Russell has been good since he's been here. He's been effective. He's
severely underrated, insanely underrated.
Overly, immensely underrated. And I think right now what is happening is you just see him get better and better and better every single year. And right now he's at the top of his game. We've never seen him play like this. I can't recall seeing a quarterback be this good and efficient in the 2000s.
Mm-hmm.
I guess I just really can't, and that's saying a lot because we've seen some really good ones. There's
never been a better generation of quarterbacks in the last 15 years. And people were worried about Brady, who has not, hung up his cleats, and people like Peyton Manning and Drew Brees, Phillip Rivers, who's I think another severely underrated quarterback. Like, whoa, it's been such a QB centric game. Who are going to be these young guys to pick up and continue that greatness? And Russell Wilson was there the whole time and never really mentioned. And now we have these younger quarterbacks, Deshaun Watson, Patrick Mahomes. Until yesterday, we have to get to this. Dak Prescott. The NFL should have nothing to worry about in terms of it remaining. And there's no, for me as a fan, and not as a football purist who might like a 3-0 game and see all the defensive tactical maneuvers that each team makes. It's the most fun when you have a great quarterback who's going 24 for 32 for 350 yards. Yeah, that's the kind of football game that I like to watch.
Well, the offense sells tickets, right?
Yeah.
Offense, we want to see the high flying, high scoring. I want to see some theatrics. I want to see a guy jumping high in the air and catching some balls and running fast, right? That's what the fans pay to see. Defense, they say defense wins championships.
Mm-hmm.
And for a long time that was Seattle's recipe. Great defense, and they won championships. Right now, that's not necessarily the case here in Seattle. We have one of the worst defenses in the National Football League. We are the worst in several categories.
Yes.
So, fortunately for you, Zach, if you're a fan of the Seattle Seahawks and you're a fan of offense, that is what you get to experience this year, because we really have one of the most explosive offenses that I've seen since I've been watching the Seattle Seahawks, since I've been here. And, like you said, we've talked about Russell Wilson on his MVP type season so far, 5 games in. But you have to look at some of the other guys around him, in particular, DK Metcalf, the wide receiver who was in his second year with the Seahawks. He is just unbelievable for a guy that's in his sophomore campaign as a professional.
He's 22?
Was that?
He's like 22 years old?
22 years old.
Yeah.
He's 22 years old and looks like he chiseled, like he took some clay and made him.
Yeah.
It's almost unfair, the things
it is unfair
going on the field right now. So
yeah,
and he's mature beyond his years, I think, when it comes to his football maturity, and he's only going to get better.
I want to talk a little bit about the branding of the NFL, and then we're going to touch briefly on a friend of ours. In the wake of George Floyd and just sort of the state of how we talk about racism in 2020, the NBA first and foremost was the one. It was the first league that really had a plan to come back, but got on board with the social justice, pro equality messages, to the point where most players were allowed to. Well, all players were. Most chose to, instead of having the name, their last name emblazoned on the top of their jersey, had some sort of different message, whether it be Black Lives Matter or Equality Now. There was 31 different ones, I think, that they were allowed to pick. And the NBA has been under the watch of Adam Silver doing this even beforehand. They just really ramped it up. The NFL, as we all know, has clearly never been very supportive of political activism or social activism when it comes to their players. Never. And then this year, it's following the lead of every other major sport, including NASCAR, weirdly, and allowing the players to deliver some sort of message, not to the degree of the NBA, but certainly more than they ever have. And Roger Goodell has even delivered a few press conferences where he essentially apologized for how the league dealt with Colin Kaepernick, who is the original when it comes to this era of social justice messaging, the first to do it. And we saw how the NFL just discarded him. And now the NFL seems to be, I don't know if their fan base is, but the NFL seems to be fully embracing all this. And this is all kind of lumped into what's known as woke culture. So first I want to get your thoughts on that, because I have seen them get criticized for oh, well, now you join the party, which is something that it's but they did. Would you rather that they still be as obstinate as they were previously? Are they late? Yeah. But there's in an instance like this, I don't think there's anything such as too late. But But I wanted to get your thoughts first on the evolution of how the NBA respects its players using their platforms for something other than football, going outside the stick to sports lane.
The NBA has always been at the forefront for a lot of this stuff,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't know whether it's because the vast majority of the athletes in the NBA are African American, because I think, what is the NFL, like 70% African American? The NBA, I think, is just probably a little bit higher than that.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe it's because there's so fewer players on each team that they can, the ownership and the coaches and the managers, have a more hands-on, direct relationship with the players and whatnot, and they can fully understand them. And maybe it's because there's more people of color in the front offices. Maybe it's a combination of all those things why the NBA was at the forefront. But I do know that the NFL dropped the ball. And like you said, better late than never. But at the same time, what were the reasons why the NFL was so late to the game, and why did they come to the game when they did? And I'll tell you, my honest opinion is because they finally realized that it was financially beneficial for them. I think they thought in years past that that their fan base was something different than it was. I think they traditionally thought that their fan base was going to be completely or the majority white men from the middle of the country who were upset about the kneeling, who were upset about this Colin Kaepernick communist character. And they thought that if they got behind that at any point in time, that they would not only damage the brand, but ultimately the bottom line. And at the end of the day, I think money is the driving force behind it all.
Well, that's why we have the Washington football team. I don't think that Dan Snyder suddenly came to his senses had not FedEx threatened to kind of remove the naming rights from their stadium. Now you're talking about this several multi-million-dollar decision, and it makes it a lot easier to decide to cast away with the Redskins. I'm still shocked that they went into the season without a new name. Like, just
they couldn't have, all the people in the world that they could have hired. They have hundreds of millions of dollars at their disposal. Mm-hmm. They could have put together like unbelievable think tanks to come up with any name. They could have brought me in. I could have came up with a name.
I think it would have been any new name that just had some sort of relationship to even. I think it would have been hilarious if they just said, "Yeah, we're going to be the Washington Nationals too."
We want to be,
or even easier for them, the Washington Capitals. Let hockey try to compete with us. Like in 6 months' time,
use the same brand and everything, the same logo, everything.
Right, exactly. But it is sort of it's interesting to watch the NFL morph into this position of like, well, we do have this responsibility to our communities and to our players, because there's still certainly issues that they haven't resolved when it comes to the domestic abuse issues that we've seen. CTE hasn't been discussed in, years now. Now that there's new things going on, and then in relation to that CTE issue, how they treat their ex-players. It's always been, I think, the weakest union, and the post-retirement, they take care of their players worse by far than any other league. And I'm going to put even hockey into that. And this brings us, I guess, to someone we both know, Dory Monson, who I feel like we have to talk about a little bit. Dory Monson, for years, I don't even know how many years, has hosted a show on Cairo, a station you and I used to work for. It's a talk station here in Seattle. And then was also the pregame and postgame host of the Cairo radio broadcasts for the Seahawks, which always garnered massive ratings. And his persona was obviously clearly different on those Sundays when he would do the analysis leading up to the game, compared to his Monday to Friday noon to 3 show, where he's a very, very right-wing talk show host, and that has not changed for a long time. And the Seahawks knew who he was. Well, he is no longer the host as of yesterday. Yesterday being the first broadcast that he missed, the pregame and postgame host, because of a tweet that he sent during a gubernatorial debate here between our incumbent Jay Inslee and the challenger Lauren Culp, where the tweet essentially was labeled transphobic because what it said was it was making fun of current Governor Inslee for saying that they believe in science, but that same science could also allow someone to go back and change their birth certificate from male to female in 1961, saying like, okay, the point of it being Jay Inslee believes in science as long as it's like the leftist, group sort of believes in that same science, talking about climate change and everything. But his argument being that like it's a denial of science if you don't believe that someone can transition from male to female and then go back and alter history even when they were presenting themselves as male, and put it forth as a joke. And I didn't even know Dory tweeted, to be honest.
Me either.
But I'm obviously, for career reasons and his legacy, he regrets going out like this. At least he still has his job at Cairo, but it's strange that the NFL and the Seahawks now are embracing these movements, and yet someone who beat the hell out of someone that they lived with or were married to or had sired a child with are still on the field. Like, yet a tweet can end it all. A punch just gets you a little bit of a punishment.
I am just floored by the fact that you said someone sired a child.
It's very old timey.
We're talking about Arabian stallions.
There was like 3 words that went through my mind before I said sired, and for some reason I stuck with sired. Yeah,
I'm gonna start using that though. I'm gonna sire, go ahead and sire me some kids. No, again, it's just weird. It's a weird. First of all, I just want to go on record and say, Dory is the guy that was responsible for me having my first opportunity in the media business. Mm-hmm. He was the first show that I appeared on. And then we went on to appear on his show weekly, doing a segment for the barbershop. And we did that for like a year. And that just became part of my life. And he became somebody that I looked up to, like, this is how you do the business. This is how you, talk on air. This is how you interview guests. This is right. This is how you, do your thing. So I want to put that in the air. I consider Dory a friend.
Yes.
I just think we're just in a weird place with our culture, with the world. And I think that, that when you make a misstep, and I'm not I don't want anybody to categorize what, because whatever Dory may have done in the past as a misstep or whatnot.
This is not a new idea he's presented. Like he does not believe in the trans community to the degree that would satisfy many. And the Seahawks have known who he is for a while. This is not the first time he said something like this, but certainly climate's changed.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm saying. So
to go back to his original point, yeah.
And now it is. We're here where it's canceled. Where you can. But what's odd to me, Zach, and I'm trying my best, and you can tell. I don't know if you guys can tell. This is kind of a touchy subject for me because you kind of sometimes got to tread lightly with these things. But I do want to make it clear how I felt. Is that there are some people and some things you cannot, you just can't cross that line. You cannot cross that line in 2020 or else you're done for. And ultimately that's what happened. I mean, but on the flip side of that is like, you could almost, I don't want it to come off this way, but like you could almost say anything about like Black people. and still keep your job. You know what I'm saying? But I think there's some places that you can and cannot go in this culture and keep your job.
What do you think would happen to, if you remember back in 2014, if Ray Rice was caught on camera this year doing what he did to his wife in 2020?
Like, he's done. Well, he was done back then.
He was done back then, but maybe not the best example then. Let's say that it came out this year before the season that Chiefs wide receiver Tyreek Hill had that audio leaked of him being abusive towards his wife. Like going forward, do you think that there's going to be these protected lists that a lot of NFL players go on, or would Frank Clark ever be able to come back and play for the Chiefs like he is now after a domestic abuse charge?
I don't know. I don't know. I think that's a tough call. I mean, if there was the type of evidence available that we've seen in the past, like with videos and text messages and stuff like that, no. Mm-hmm. There's no way, man. There's no way. I just think, and some of that I agree with. Some of that I think it's fair. I think, if you've done some things that are that egregious, maybe you don't deserve to play in the National Football League, or maybe you don't deserve to have a show, or maybe, it's unfortunate. And and again, I think it's unfortunate that that's where we are, but I think it's unfortunate for you if you do that. It
is. I guess, and I've had just a bunch of emotions because I think a lot of what Dory says is despicable, without a doubt. But instead of just removing his platform, which is at least half of it now has been taken away. Again, we'll see what happens with the other half. Which is, if you've read any of his listeners' reactions, and he's very successful. He's a very, very successful media figure, without a doubt. It's only going to cause them to double down and more strongly believe that there are no such things as trans rights. And it doesn't give Dory, and I don't know if he would have ever come around on believing in the trans community or not, but now we'll never find out. And you're going to have a lot of people now that certainly will never, because they're the person that they used to like, that they used to enjoy listening to during the day, got taken away and now has been caught up in this cancel culture that we're all living in 2020. It just seems like some people were interested in giving a second chance to, and I feel like oftentimes, I think Kevin Hart being a great example. Kevin Hart lost the Oscars because of some homophobic tweets that he sent out as an adult, years ago. And they were jokes. Right. And fortunately, he didn't lose everything. He just lost that gig. He's still a huge name. But there was this documentary about him and what he went through after that and how he rebuilt himself. Now, he has the opportunity to do that because he's Kevin Hart. If Dory loses this gig, where else? There's not really another talk radio station around here. I'm sure he could start a podcast, bring us more competition. But what good is it? Again, I guess the other issue I have with this, Terry, is that this is not the first time he's said something like this. He's kind of paid to do this.
And that's the problem with where I am with it, is because, as much as I know Dory on one hand, I was never truly a loyal listener to where I listened every day and I knew the things that he was saying. So a lot of the stuff that I'm hearing that he stands for and that he said, I'm hearing it secondhand, third hand.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, really? That doesn't sound at all like the person I know, right? So yeah, it's hard for me to, justify the two.
Well, you and I both know we know him off air and on air. And right. It's a very different person. He's putting on a performance, and that performance is designed to gather as many listeners. So he's definitely he's broken bad, right? Certainly more since the Trump era has, since 2016 for sure. But he's always been conservative. He's always been saying bombastic things, and he always got his contract renewed. He always got bonuses. He got more endorsements, and it's to me, that's some weakness when all of a sudden you just cut someone that you've been paying to do to do exactly what he did last week, because now the what is appropriate and what is inappropriate. Because if you look at a lot of the responses, his tweet got a lot of responses. He's since deleted it, but most of them were like, "Yeah, this is how I feel," and that is how a lot of people feel. And I would say actually that's what the majority of his listeners, if not the majority of Washington, feels like. Trans is still I get it, but trans is still a new idea, and while I understand it's like frustrating to be someone who's trans and not have someone get it, you're only delaying, or whoever makes the decision to can someone like Dory Monson is only delaying mainstream acceptance by another period of whatever, right, years, months, whatever it is, because now it's the trans community and the activists that have taken away a guy like Dory. And are you really going to want to empathize or sympathize or hear from them? No, probably not. Like when you, and I've seen it happen in a million instances at this point, when something that you like is taken away by a group that either you're ignorant of or don't really like, the odds of you ever actually being an advocate of that group, shrink exponentially.
I agree 100%. And here's the thing I wanted to ask you, Zach, and it's been on my mind, since forever, really, but more to the forefront in the last couple of weeks with everything that's transpired, is that how I'm just confused on how people do not want to accept this as real or as part of our society now, just because someone else has decided that they are trans or bi or queer or whatever it might be. I for whatever maybe I'm being naive about it, but I just don't understand why people would be so upset that somebody else's life choices that do not affect you at all in the slightest.
Yeah.
Why would you get turned upside down about it?
All of a sudden, pronouns became like the thing we must absolutely cherish and protect.
Like it doesn't.
This is what's annoying, because there's nothing you said right there that is wrong. Nothing whatsoever. And all of the boogeymen that were supposed to come about from accepting trans movements, the trans rights. Like, you remember Target lost like major stock share when they announced that they were going to have gender neutral bathrooms. And the big fear was put out by assholes like Kurt Schilling, who had weirdly blocked me on Twitter, even though I've never mentioned him once, from saying like, well, now we're just going to have these perverted men in dresses going into the bathrooms and peeping on the children. And none of that happened. None of that happened. You remember North Carolina had this huge issue when it came to gender neutral bathrooms. So all of the fears, it's the same thing as same-sex marriage. Like, remember people predicting like, Vermont was one of the first to legalize it. And it was like, well, Vermont's going to burn. Vermont's still growing apples and making amazing cheese, and everybody's life is A-okay. Right. So if someone wants to present themselves and be called by a different pronoun and change, what do you care if they change what it says on their damn driver's license or birth certificate, or if they asked to say to be called she,
or whatever? Why does that bother? Whatever it is, dress or what? It doesn't affect us. It does, like, not even the slightest.
No.
I just don't get it. I never will. So, I mean, it is what it is.
But then to go, the one issue that I guess I have with trans positivity is also, I don't know how to feel about a 7-year-old coming to you and saying, I don't feel like I'm the right gender, and immediately you start them on a hormone treatment. That's weird too. And I don't even think Dory has considered the nuance of that. But that's needs to be
That's
further.
a whole different ball of wax, Zach. I think
Different.
now you're starting to talk about parenting and and different things of that nature. And
Yeah.
a lot of times, I subscribe to the thought process. Okay, we're gonna give our 7-year-old, some space to grow, but at the end of the day, still the parent. And we make, I'm not gonna do, I'm a parent. And that's not meaning I'm going to try to send my 7-year-old to some kind of Mike Pence shock therapy to change him to be straight. if my child doesn't believe that they're straight, but I'm still going to be a parent to my child. Like I'm not going to let my 7-year-old daughter go outside in a miniskirt, and fishnets. That's just not. I mean, there's just some things you just don't do.
So we'll see. Dory is on a legitimate vacation this week. Like it was actually scheduled. It seems very fishy. But he's been suspended indefinitely from the Seahawks. And, Terry, you and I have been in media long enough to know that an indefinite suspension truly lasts till the end of time. So he's,
we might as well call it infinity.
Yeah, infinity.
I've been suspended infinitively.
But will he get his? It will be interesting to see if he does. I would find it difficult to believe that Cairo would bring him back, but maybe they will, and that's a decision they're probably going to put off for as long as possible. But it's certainly still something that may happen. That 168 hours from now, or next Monday at noon, Dory is back on the airwaves, and while his beliefs might not change, the way he talks about the issue may. And wouldn't that be a lot better than just getting rid of him?
Yeah.
Which feels satisfying. Like
I have some conversion therapy. Conversion therapy.
I'm friends with people, and I like people who are nothing but thrilled that stuff has been taken away from him. Because there is that satisfaction, that head on a stick that you got. But I think that there's a possibility for a better outcome, I suppose.
And it's messed up, but at the end of the day, there's still a market. There's still a market for what Dory does.
Yeah.
There's still people who would be willing to pay for that somewhere. I don't know if Seattle is the place. He might be bigger than Seattle, but there's definitely, even in Seattle, there's a market for it, obviously, because he was the #1 show.
Because in no one listens to talk radio in Seattle. You're and this is the case with no matter what city or suburb you live in. That's where the audience is. It's not, it's not the people who live downtown. The ACAB, BLM types. It's the people who live even closer to the city than you, Terry. Everett, Kent, everything like that. That's where his audience was, and and they're going to be nothing but angry about this. And are they going to learn any new lessons? I don't think so.
No.
And who would have thought, like, of all the people Terry, that it would have been Dory Monson who lost a gig because of a tweet?
No, man.
It's hilarious.
It's
hilarious to picture him tweeting. It's hysterical to me.
It is nuts, man. And again, to put this all in a big capsule is, and it's insane to me, because these things that I'm hearing that he says, and the way he thinks, and the things that he projects out to his audience is completely polar opposite than the person that I know when that microphone was not on. And you have to think that every Sunday for the last decade or so, he's worked with like almost exclusively Black guys.
Yeah.
Like from Jordan Babineau to Ray Roberts and Michael Bumpus, and I mean,
all the Black friends.
Huh?
All the Black friends.
All of his Black friends. Right there. You should put that on his resume.
Warren Moon.
Moon.
He probably doesn't want to mention that one.
I have like that. But he has like 3 solid Black friends.
Yeah. That's not bad.
How many of you can say that?
Exactly. And I mean friends, not people that you reckon, like friends that would help you actually, who are in their first and last name is in your cell phones. Like you could text right now. Over under 3 is pretty high.
You know what? I want to ask you this question. Someone presented this to me a long time ago, Zach.
Yeah.
And this is, I don't know if you've ever thought about this. I don't know if any of our viewers have ever thought about this. And it's kind of meandering off topic, but I think it's important to have, important, quick conversation to have.
Mm-hmm.
And you just reminded me of it. So I ask you, Zach Burns, when was the last time you had a Black person in your home?
2 years ago. But that's actually not bad. No one's had anyone in their house for a year.
Well, that is true. That is true. That is very true.
Can I just do Black per capita? Because I haven't had that many people. I didn't have that many people visit anyway. So I'm going to go with like 8.5% of total visitors were Black, which is, still
in the last, how long?
Last 2 years. I would say in the last 2 years. Or the year before the pandemic.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, I mean, and I asked that. I'm asking that to everybody that's out there that's watching too. Like, do you know when the last time you had a Black person in your home?
As a guest too, again.
Now, exactly. Now, can you ask me when the last time I had a white person in my home?
Probably more recently. No, hasn't been
all the time.
I would imagine. Yeah, you live in Snohomish.
Every day. That's the question when I'm trying to make people sometimes understand the concept of white privilege, or the concept of implicit bias, or the concept of just all these different things that that I have to go through on a daily basis, or people like me have to go through on a daily basis. I mean, we don't take into account some of those things. Like, and I use that as an example, like who's been in your house, but you could take it's way deeper than that. Like,
it's a funny but a very illuminating example.
Like because you probably don't think about it on a regular basis. Like,
right.
Who has been in my house in the last year? Okay, I don't know if I've had a Black person in my house, and if I do, I know exactly who it was. Right? Mm-hmm. I couldn't tell. Like it's so there's that, and then like who did I see at the gas station, or who helped me with my groceries today, or who was the bank teller, or all these different things. And so, yeah, that's just something that popped in my head just a second ago, and sometimes I think about that.
Well, and how many Black dudes have to joke about like being the only Black person in a situation just to kind of put it to bed?
The kid like elephant in the room?
Yeah, it's just like I've seen it happen a million times where it's like everyone's just hoping that it gets addressed, but they're not going to address it. They're kind of waiting for, you, Terry, to be like, well, it's awful white in here. It's just
So just imagine this scenario, Zach.
Yeah.
Now, so it happened to me just about a month or so ago. My last trip east of the mountains, my summer vacation, we were out on the boats over in the Chelan area, and of course, I am literally the only Black person within probably 50 miles.
Right.
And we're out here on these boats. These boats are kind of circled around, and everybody's playing their loud music. And all of a sudden, like, Ice Cube comes on, and it's like, is this the real? Are they about to play the real version of this? And they played the real versions of every song, and it's like, are they? I mean, and they're everybody's like. Mm-hmm. I'm like, are you gonna sing along? Are you saying the words right now? Like,
yeah. Did they?
What? Yes, I'm like, I'm just out there in my, my Speedo, watching all these people sing the N-word songs.
Wow,
interesting.
Yeah, that's still surprising to me, because I thought that had just become just hip hop etiquette, like. Obviously, people love songs with the N-word in it, but it's like, if you're going to rap along,
you got to skip.
Kind of sort of. I mean, Eminem doesn't even say it.
And you think he would have the pass?
Yeah.
If anybody has the pass, it's Eminem.
And also, just don't rap along to it.
Yeah,
just don't, because you're not good at it. You're not making the song better. Yeah. Wow. That is true. That is something that I hadn't thought of in a while.
Yeah. Interesting.
People. And I'm surprised. I'm surprised because this is something you probably. Let me just invite you into white culture for a little while, Terry, because you probably don't get enough of it.
No, let me in, bud.
Yeah. There is. Let me just tell you about the first. Not the first, but one of the first jobs I ever had was in Boston. So shocking that it has some racial language in it. Yes, David Ortiz never took his jersey off. Just because he knew he was safe if he was David Ortiz. But.
Oh no, he's different. It's Ortiz.
Yeah. So I was working at this grocery store there, and I meet the manager, and he's showing me around and everything that I'm gonna have to do, and then we go outside to have a cigarette break, and he pulls out his cigarettes. He's like, "Do you want one?" And I'm like, "No, I'm good. I don't smoke those. I have my own." And what he smoked were Newports. Oh. And
see where this is going.
Yeah. Do I even really need to finish? And I had known this dude for like 17 minutes. And he had already evaluated me as like, oh, this is a cool guy to say the N-word around. Uh-huh. And it was just like, okay, I barely clocked in at this point. Mm-hmm. And already he's like comfortable enough saying this word. So, however, this is what's the interesting thing about him. He would also say that he's not a racist. He would also point out the fact that, he's had a couple of black people in his house, or there was a dude who worked in the deli who was black, and man, they would talk about the Red Sox all the time. So clearly,
George in the deli is cool.
Yeah, exactly. Cool. So there is that. There seems to be, once the windows are rolled up or you look all around so you can finish that joke's punchline, there is still this absolute comfort in saying that word around each other. And the thing is like he was in the power position, so I didn't do anything about it. So once he kind of threw it out there, and I didn't even think it was a test, he was just like, I heard it constantly. And again, this is Boston. And before the Sox won the World Series.
Right.
So
that cleared everything up. That
that helps. But I wonder how. I mean, I'm sure to some degree that sort of stuff happens, but I could give you 1,000 more examples.
Put it like this, Zach, and this is I want to kind of help white America, all those that are listening and watching us right now, understand where we come from as African Americans in this country, is that based on our experiences, both individually and collectively, we believe that kind of thing happens all the time.
Okay.
All the time. Like I don't think we consciously walk around thinking that, oh, this guy probably says the N-word, or he thinks I'm an N-word, or whatever. But we've had enough experiences with it that we know that it's prevalent enough that, you probably won't say it here while I'm sitting here. Mm-hmm. More than likely, you're not going to do that. But I bet when I'm not around, you say it all the time. That's what I mean, and that's when you think about where we are with everything in our country, with the entire Black Lives Matter movement, with all the social protests that are going on, a lot of that is based on, we see what's happening around us, all these various different, from George Floyd and Michael Brown and Trayvon Martin, all the way, you run the list that goes forever, right? You got to believe that this is kind of a prevalent thing, because these things happen all the time, and they continue to happen all the time, and nobody ever gets in trouble. So there must be some unspoken rule in law or some that we don't know about. That this is why it continues to happen.
Yeah, and
that's why people are angry. That's why people are like. That's why, and then you get people that say, "That's not me. I'm not racist. I would never do anything like that. I would never say anything like that." Mm-hmm. But we have all these examples.
And that's the worst. That's the worst conversation is to get caught doing something like that and saying just, "Am I racist?" Yeah, like I am. I know that. Like I don't think that is the defining trait of me, but do I have implicit bias which leads to racism? Hell yeah. Like when you're thinking about the everyday actions that you see that are racist, like not even necessarily like the empirically hard, the empirically harmful ones, but if I see a black dude order a pumpkin spice latte, like I take note. It's just like that's a weird thing for a black dude to do. That is kind of casting a bias against something. They should be able to.
But it's facts. It's factual though. That was based in reality. That stereotype is based. We don't mess around with no pumpkin spice.
Right.
You got the sweet potato pie latte for me, please.
But I think it's okay to be racist as a first impulse, right? Like to be uncomfortable, and then your humanity kicks in after that. And I think that is what anti-racism is to me.
Is it racism or is it implicit bias?
But isn't
I think there's a difference. I think there's a technical difference between the two.
Yeah.
Racism means, I think you're in a position of power and you have the ability to, enforce your will on someone else, and you're the power structure is not the same. And I'm strictly solely judging you based on your race. Mm-hmm. Whereas, I think implicit bias is something that you may have based on past experiences or past, like for instance, if I just listened to gangster rap all the time, I would think that every black person I met was a gangster, like that you sell crack and you got hoes.
Well, unfortunately for so many white kids of a generation, that was their introduction to black culture. Like it's once we got past the gimmicky stage of hip hop, like a lot of it was about that. And then the films, you take Menace to Society, Juice, Boys in the Hood, and then try to find the movies of that era that just have this sort of positive black protagonist in them. And the best you can do from those movies is, Cuba Gooding Jr.'s character in Boys in the Hood. And this is, let's throw New Jack City into there. Yeah. This was sort of the exposure to black culture that I think led to a lot of either ugly racism, which I agree is kind of this extension of implicit bias, but a different thing. But certainly, laid the foundation for that implicit bias. Like when you're just, pounded with this image of, especially young black males, how you think that they act and what they're into, that sticks with you when you don't see anything else in a real meaningful manner.
And that's 100% where and I think that's a lot of where we are, especially with our generation and the one that is older than us, the baby boomers, Generation X, maybe the one that are right after us. That's all that we saw. We were raised watching television and movies, right? That's how we were brought up. That was our babysitter, and unfortunately, in Hollywood and in the music industry, that was given to African American artists and actors as your roles, if you want to be successful, if you want to sell records on our record label, if you want to be in our movie, you are either going to have to be a gangster, a drug dealer, a prostitute, some kind of hustler, whatever it might be. That's it. There was only one Cliff Huxtable.
Yeah,
and he turned out to be the bad guy. But
he turned out to be the worst of all of them, right?
And he turned out to be the bad guy. But There's a million Black stories that could have been told during that time and could still be told at this point in time. Yeah. But I mean, for whatever reason, those weren't things that were sold to the masses, and it affects people. It affects how you view people. If the only time I ever see a Chinese person is in a kung fu flick, I think every Chinese person knows kung fu.
Right. Yeah.
You might just know math, or you might be dumb and Asian. Yeah. I don't know. I don't know until I know you.
I'm sure there's idiots in every race, every every background. But yeah, and to take it even a step further, I would ingest those movies with my white suburban friends growing up, and then not only would I listen and consume the culture, I would then mimic it. Like, you should have seen like a sixth grade, not necessarily like class photo, because you dress white on those days,
right?
But like the rest of the time, the more Black culture you could mimic, the better. Like there's so many fashion decisions that I made stolen directly from an album cover or from a film,
right?
Because it was something different and it was dangerous. But I could visit it as an outsider. Would I ever actually want to find out the causes of what made that, what made life in the hood that difficult? No.
Probably not.
In fact, I wasn't even interested in making it better. It was interesting to watch.
Yeah.
If Boys in the Hood had been shot in, the neighborhood that I grew up in, the cast would look remarkably different. Cuba Gooding Jr. still probably would have been in it, but the story would have been really boring.
Yeah, but I'm gonna tell you something, and we can get on whatever for our last few minutes. But just to encapsulate, because I had a little taste of all of that. I moved around a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And so I got an opportunity to, see what the suburban white kid lifestyle was like at times. And I got a chance to see some of the guys that wanted to emulate that life. And, I'll tell you this, and this is no word of a lie. I don't know if I've ever said this out loud in public to anybody, but some of those kids that I knew, some of the things that I saw in some of those suburban neighborhoods and some of those schools, 10 times worse than the hood.
Mm-hmm.
Like 10 times worse. Like, a lot of the kids that I knew growing up that were actually in the neighborhood, a lot of them didn't do drugs. A lot of them didn't drink alcohol. A lot of them didn't do crime. They were scared of it. They were scared of the law. They didn't want to end up like maybe some of their older relatives. Whereas sometimes in the suburban places I lived in, these kids had means of getting stuff and were doing it all.
Mm-hmm.
I'm talking about hardcore drugs, from cocaine to heroin to you name it. And they were going out every weekend and breaking into cars, stealing cars, breaking it into houses and stealing TVs, and the craziest shit you ever saw, man.
I can kind of explain that, Terry. There's a lack of repercussion. You don't have that fear of law enforcement or even of getting in trouble, because in the end, it'll probably get fixed.
Yeah, it's exactly.
So, your behavior. Yeah.
Nail on the head. So
yeah.
I mean, sometimes it's, I don't know, man.
Well, Terry, I gotta have you over and get my numbers up. I'm working on my spreadsheet.
I'll be honest with you. I need to get my numbers up too. I don't have nearly enough Black people at my house.
Really? Yeah. Well, I can imagine the demographics of your neighborhood. So don't just get a token Black friend, Terry. I mean, actually have enjoy
him. Yes. Hey, any volunteers? Hit us up. Hit us up. I'm at Terry Holloman on Twitter.
That's right. All right, dude. Great talking to you tonight.
Good to see you, man. Yeah. Stay up on there in Portland, man.
Yeah, I will. And there's no reason for us to stop this show. We're gonna keep doing it. I'm just gonna do it from my lovely bunker. You're gonna do it from the Terry Holloman Museum in your lovely bunker. So a couple of favors you could do for us: hit the share button, whatever you're watching this on. If you follow either and I, the video gets posted on Periscope. Retweet that. the more views, the better. Especially if you like the show, it really does help us. We're going to be a word of mouth operation, but that works. That works oftentimes.
Yeah.
So let's go forward. All right, buddy.
Good, man. Good to see you. Take care.
See ya.